I think the kind of macro question I'd love to ask you about is, I think there's always a danger, for progressives in general, and me in particular on this issue of Israel-Palestine, and not being able to distinguish like the normative from the descriptive. Like there are things I would like to see happen in American politics, right? And so I'm always probably inclined to, I worry that I'm inclined to exaggerate how much the things that I want to see happening are actually happening, right? So I'm curious. So but I wonder how substantial you think the shift that's taking place in American politics on the question of Israel and Palestine is, and how likely you think it is to change the Democratic Party in terms of like the people that the Democratic Party, will nominate, person will nominate for president in 2028.
Well, so I mean, I don't think it's just wish casting on the part of people who want the
Right.
Democratic
That's the
Party
word.
more
Yeah.
left-wing direction to say that among younger Democrats, there's a sea change coming, right? I mean, if you look at kind of all the polls, and to be honest, not just among younger Democrats, because younger Republicans are also becoming more
Mm.
hostile to Israel for reasons that sometimes are like not as salubrious. But I just think young people in general, look at what's happening there through an entirely different lens than the one that's been dominant in American politics. At the same time, I would imagine that the candidates in 2028 are going to be really, really cross-pressured because there's still a like substantial, just in terms of lobbying and kind of the money that can be raised against you. I mean, we've seen several politicians, AIPAC is kind of quite proudly taken them out and poured money behind their challengers. And there's also a way, and I guess this could change at a certain point, in which being pro-Israel becomes a sort of stand-in for being moderate more generally.
Yes. Yes.
And so candidates that are afraid that they will be seen as kind of too unelectably left are going to need to prove their pro-Israel bona fides with some power brokers within the party. That said, I feel like there's been a real sea change just in like almost the last week. And
Mhm.
so when you're talking about something that happens on such a short time horizon, it's
Mhm.
really difficult to say how lasting it is.
Mhm.
But because the starvation in Gaza has become so undeniable,
Mhm.
it has been, you're even seeing people like Richie Torres
Yes.
demanding a surge of aid. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're kind of breaking with the pro-Israel consensus more broadly, but he has said something different. He said something interesting, which is that he doesn't know if the rift between Netanyahu and the Democrat, or the rift between the Israeli government and the Democratic Party, can be healed. And he put all the
Mhm.
blame for that on Netanyahu, not on people to his left. And he's
Mhm.
also defended Zoran Mamdani from some of
Mhm.
the
Mhm. Mhm.
really kind of, ugliest and most Islamophobic attacks on him. And that could be a matter of principle, but it could also, he's an ambitious politician in New York who may also see, kind of which way the winds are blowing.
Yeah. Why do you think that? I mean, I agree with you. I feel like in the mainstream media, the discourse in the last week has felt really different than it did before. There's less of a kind of a both sidesism, and a lot of people seem kind of emboldened to say things very bluntly in a way they didn't before. I'm wondering why you think. I mean, maybe yes, things perhaps are worse, but I mean, Israel had cut off aid for almost 3 months earlier this year. The
Mhm.
ICC prosecuted, put an indictment for war crimes of starvation last November. Why do you think that like this dam seems to have broken in the media? I mean, you know the media very, very well. What do you think explains this?
I think it's a couple. I mean, first of all, I do think that things are just much worse,
Mhm.
And the thing about starvation is that there's a sort of tipping point, right? Like you can cut off aid and the physical that might cause like immediate suffering, but the
Mhm.
undeniable physical consequences just take some time to manifest.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's part of it. I mean, part of it is just the images, and it's why there's been such a fight over this one particular image that the New York Times showed of this really emaciated child, that then they added more information that he actually had this like I think neuroskeletal disorder that impeded his muscle growth. And this has been taken as evidence by
Right.
defenders of Israel that like this is all a hoax. But nevertheless, the image, I mean, when you look at, say, Donald Trump, who now says like the kids are hungry, why does he
Mm.
say that? It's because of what he's seeing on TV. So I think that, especially writers can sometimes underestimate how important visuals are. I mean, I don't think that Netanyahu does. I think that's why he's kept journalists out of Gaza. I think that was a big thing. I think
Yeah.
B'Tselem and Physicians for Human Rights
Mhm.
coming out and calling Israel a genocide, or I'm sorry, calling Israel's war in Gaza a genocide, kind of legitimated people who maybe were coming to that conclusion on their own, but were very wary of being accused of anti-Semitism.
Mm.
So yeah, I think that it's all of those things sort of building. Then there's a kind of tipping point sometimes that happens in the media that is almost a little bit like alchemical. You can look at, say, the murder of George Floyd and say, why did
Mhm.
that catalyze
Yes.
something that
Yes.
murder of Philando Castile didn't? It's very
Mm.
hard to say. There's just sometimes a spark that's hard to explain.
Yeah, I guess yeah, I mean, it seems like partly it's right. It's that the media has a herd mentality in general for good and for bad. But maybe in this issue in particular, there's like a kind of strength in numbers because you say like people, like particularly anchors on TV or whatever, might be worried about getting out in front of people too much and
Mhm.
therefore being attacked as being anti-Israel, anti-Semitic. But kind of once everybody's doing it, there's a kind of greater safety for any one person.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely. Like nobody wants to be kind of perceived as radical on this issue.
Mm, mm.
But at a certain point, it's kind of, who are you going to believe, me or your own lying eyes? And there's also a sort of, I think, umbrage that journalists take at a certain point at being sort of told that they're not supposed to report what is so obviously happening.